Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and I get to talk to the most interesting people. Some of them I even get to talk to twice, and today's one of those special privileges. Wayne Morrow, he did the interview that now I get to do. So Wayne, why don't you introduce us to our guest and let's get on with the story.
Okay, glad to. I have a friend who I met one time in my classroom.
You're a teacher.
Yes, I was a teacher at Grants Pass High School, and this man right here, Maurice Saunders, came in to educate some kids that were in my class. They thought they knew everything about World War II, and he came in and kind of told them the way it was in reality.
Didn't I hear kind of a line that these kids figured, boy, if we'd have been there.
Oh yes, yeah, I had two sophomore boys sitting right in front of me, and I remember them, we were talking about World War II as kind of a spin-off of the...
History class, right?
No, English class.
Okay.
But a short story dealing with it. And they said, in essence, boy, yeah, if we'd have been there, we'd have shown those Germans a thing or two. We'd have done this and that. And I told them, I said, fellas, you know, I wasn't in World War II myself, but I do know you have no idea what you're talking about. And so from that, I got the idea. I just thought, I have a good friend, a retired minister in town who had served in the Navy. He had, was on a ship that had been kamikaze attacks 92 times.
Oh.
And so then I got calls from people, and a friend of Maurice called me and said,
you ought to talk to Maurice.
He said, you ought to talk to Maurice Saunders. And I did, and that was the start of a great friendship.
And you'd retired by this time, shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it was 2 years after that I retired.
And
then I joined the Golden Eagles Kiwanis, and Maury was in the organization, and at breakfast one time we were talking over, I suggested to him he needed to get some of this stuff down in black and white. He said he didn't know for sure what to do. So we talked about it, and I said, let's just you and I team up on it. So he's got the stories. I asked the questions. I think I drove him nuts at times with my questions.
No way.
But that gave, and out of that came the book.
The book about history. Now, how can we verify, have you verified the stories with Maury, or did you use a little poetic license here?
That's a very good question. Right from the very start, Maury can tell you this, that I told him, as I had taught journalism, and I had it ingrained in me, accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. That's what Joseph Pulitzer said. And I told him, I said, you know, the one thing that I'm going to be a stickler on is it's got to be accurate. And so I would take a small section, go home and write it, and bring it back the next week. We met weekly on Wednesday mornings at his house. And I'd leave it with him. And I said, if there's anything wrong, and it's easy, and I made mistakes all over the place because I didn't understand some things he was talking about, and I should have gotten it clear. And so he read every single section, and I said, anything different, tell me. And I needed to be corrected many times, and he did. He's a good Air Force officer. And then when I got through with the entire thing, I had the entire rough draft. I gave him a copy, his wife a copy. I said, go home and read that whole thing, and if there's anything not there. So, I mean, when I look at it now, that thing is accurate.
This thing
I feel good about it.
And the artwork? Where does the artwork come from?
Oh, the cover was done by a teacher at Redwood Elementary School.
And
his name is Jason Clark.
And this ship, did you fly this baby?
Well, those are the two planes that Maury flew. This is his biography. The quote at the top, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That's what he said at the time. But the plane up at the top is a B-47, a 6-engine jet that he flew in the Cold War. And the bottom one is the B-26 Martin Marauder a 2-engine prop job that he flew 66 missions in World War II.
Does it sound like he's talking about you?
Yes, he does talk a lot about me.
Well,
And glad to.
the thing I first noticed about you, those shoes are polished. I wondered if you spit on them. It looks like military issue here on I am so glad you're my guest. I've looked forward to this. You've been in a book signing party. I mean, people are proud of you all over town. Where can we get the book? The book is available at the Historic Society in
Yes.
Grants Pass.
For $8 is the cost.
And it's limited edition, right?
Yes.
I can already see it going into second and third printing, because what pilot, what kid that sat there looking at Air Force and Navy flyers wouldn't be fascinated? You had stories of 66 missions?
In this airplane.
Oh, one of them, is that this airplane?
No,
This?
that goes with the jet.
Okay, now the helmet you were wearing in the other one.
That leather jacket and from time to time a regular infantryman's helmet.
Okay, but I asked him a little bit earlier if he ever wore the leather helmet right out of World War I. He said, in training. Boy, this has been around. Where all's it been?
Oh, it's been through a lot of hard times.
I asked him about his brain bucket, and he's told me he used it for baths too, but not this one. This is very special, isn't it?
Well, yes, I've had it quite a while.
It's very heavy. What?
That was what he used in the B-47 in the Cold War. We're talking about the 1950s, and
Right, this is newfangled.
yeah, that's
the
high tech
latest
for
brain.
compared with the World War II.
Well, get
let's-
right into your favorite story, Maury. Tell me about.
Well, in reference to that, during the Cold War, of course, we were global in our operations, and that helmet has been on my head on crossing both oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, a number of times. We pulled alert duty during the Cold War, and we were trying to keep the Russians all on their toes, and therefore we needed to pull alert duty in foreign countries. When I was stationed in Florida, we flew to Morocco, and we'd fly nonstop across the Atlantic and land in Sidi Slimane, where we were on alert duty. When I was stationed on the West Coast, we performed alert duty in Guam, and we'd fly nonstop there.
That's a lot of miles.
Yes. That's just that people really don't understand what the Cold War is all about as far as the military is concerned, but it was almost as bad as World War I, World War II. But that's the brief history of that helmet.
Well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about Maury? Because he's not bragging enough about himself, and I want to hear all about this wonderful fella that's moved to Southern Oregon. And
Well, he was born and raised in a little town called Ilwaco on the coast, just across the Columbia River, and he was
so you're a Washingtonian, but there was no way to get from.
From Astoria, we were across the river from Astoria, Oregon, at the mouth of Columbia River.
So the only way is by a boat.
Well, pretty much so. We had a ferry that ran in the daytime, but in bad weather and at night it didn't operate. So we were isolated.
From Milwaukee.
Ilwaco.
An Indian name.
Okay, way out there on.
It's right on the coast, but growing up there, of course, he was very meager existence for the family, but he liked hunting and fishing, both.
That helped out to
Yeah,
subsidize.
even He even had a bear put him up a tree one time, right, Maurice? Or actually, as a boy, he got scared and went up a tree right quick, and the bear went the other way as fast as it could, too.
Okay.
But he grew up, and one of the things that's brought out in the book that people who have read it said they appreciate quite a bit of information on he and his family surviving the Depression.
Oh, it
And
was tough out west. Guess
Yeah.
it was tough every place, but
it was. In fact, if I can, I'll give you 2 sentences
perfect.
out of here.
This
that-
book is just a real treasure. Lucky the day you found him, right?
Indeed, he found me.
But, of course, during the Depression, Morrow said, and this is a quote, he said, we had patches on our patches. It described their clothes, but their food, being right on the coast, they had access to about anything. And at one time he was doing just a little complaining, even with everything they had to eat. And I like what his dad said. And so here's just a couple sentences. Occasionally, Morrow did a little complaining about the family food. His dad quickly and very firmly put it in proper perspective for him. Son, you don't know how lucky you are. Listen to me. God placed us here. When the tide is out, the table is set. And don't you forget it.
Wow.
That's
Very
kind of a
true.
neat dad.
Yep, he was.
So tell them about how the different foods that you got and how you got them.
Well, we pretty much lived off the sea. This was a little logging fishing town. We had one small sawmill and 2 fish canneries, and basically everyone had a garden. We didn't know we were poor because we ate well. We had clams, crabs, oysters, anything that comes out of the sea, and lots of salmon.
Ooh.
And in fact, another little story, I think it might be in there. I came home. We lived close to the school when I was in grade school, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, and we would come home for lunch. And I can remember complaining to my mother about eating creamed crab legs on toast for lunch. And, just have it too much. But I'm never tired of all sorts of seafood. I love it today.
Well, it was survival mode there, huh? Oh, my goodness. Well, from living by the sea to flying over the sea, why don't we get to some specific favorite stories of yours about Morrow?
Well, there's lots of them.
I know we can let him tell them, or you can read them,
You
but
tell them.
A couple of them maybe I should let you. The title of the book, I think, really brings out some of the flying things. And the title really isn't mine. Morrow gave me the idea for the title, and he probably doesn't even know it. But
No, that was inadvertent, believe me.
yeah, and I just happened to, as an English teacher, you learn when you read stories, you really pick out what are called reoccurring themes. It's where something pops up here,
Yeah,
and a little bit later it comes up, and it kind of catches your attention. And on at least 3 times, while I was getting the information from him, he said, oh man, he saw this P-38 sitting over there during flight school. And he said, that's the plane I wanted to fly. The P-38 was it the fastest fighter at the time that America had?
It was at the time.
The twin-engine fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he wanted. And he said, I dreamed of flying that plane. Well, when it came time to be assigned to a plane, what was the famous quote they said to you, big boy?
You're too big. You're
too big this guy is. He stands head and shoulders above me, and I think I'm a giant.
Yeah.
Well, I was 6'3" and I weighed about 210 pounds, but they had a rule that I wasn't aware of, that you couldn't be over 6 feet, 5'10" or 11. So that kept me out of the cockpit. But later I got to fly the airplane and found out that I could fit in there real well.
You can take off the extra pounds, but you can't take off the extra inches, huh?
It didn't bother me. I flew the P-38 and the P-51 and all but the P-47, and that rule applied to all fighters, and I could still fly them.
Oh, okay, because you've got books here. Why don't you talk a little bit about, these are the books he's talking about, these same planes?
Well, this one, particular one here, is the pilot's manual for the B-26. This is when they told him, you're too big for a fighter plane, forget it. Although he qualified in every other aspect on written tests that he's taken, he was in the top 10%. He took a test in planes doing what's called acrobatics, where you just, you fly just doing loops and rolls, and he scored as high as anybody. But then they told him, well, you can forget about it, you're going into a bomber. And that just really hit hard to him. But he just, okay. So this is the one for the Martin B-26 Marauder. This is the pilot's manual. This is the actual thing, and this is where I did a lot of research out of this, just getting the history of the plane, how it got started, how they built it, and all of the systems that are in it, the crew. It was always a 6-man crew. There was a pilot and a co-pilot, and of course he started out, they told him you're going to be a co-pilot, but he didn't want to be that.
How long did that last?
Not very long.
You just moved right up in the world.
Well, I worked very hard to keep out of the right seat, so they refer to.
And to get in the right seat, too.
The one on the right, that's for the co-pilot.
That's the co-pilot.
The left is the pilot.
But,
Correct one, I meant.
Oh,
in the right seat.
That's right.
Number one pilot. Well, now, you had to learn all this. I mean, any plane that you'd hop into and fly, first came study.
Absolutely.
Study, study, study. You want to know where.
Well, this is just the pilot's manual. There's a manual for each system on the airplane. The hydraulics, the electronics, every separate system has a book about that size.
And you're, as a pilot, you have to know a whole bunch.
Yes.
About every plane you fly.
You have to know your airplane, and example, the instrument panel, you must pass a blindfold test to hit every switch and every button in the cockpit.
Just in case there's smoke in the cockpit, or did you ever have smoke in the cockpit?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Scary, but what did you do?
It gets your adrenaline up there and you really get to moving.
Did I understand you had to bail out one time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that something you
The
talk
word is eject. From a jet. You eject from a jet. You bail out of any other airplane.
So is this the brain bucket that went on the ejection?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Saunders. And it saved your life.
Yes, I can tell a story about that. Any airplane that you have to get out of, you don't get out unless you have to, really. Ours was on fire, and it was at night. And we got the crew, all the three of us, all ejected and got out. And coming down the parachute, I took my helmet off and began shouting to see if I could, the other crew members could hear me, and I couldn't, and I almost dropped my helmet. I thought, what the heck, I don't need it anymore. I'm out of there, and it dawned on me that I had, in Korea, I'd been in Korea prior to that, we had a fighter pilot who ejected from his fighter in over friendly territory, and he was coming down his parachute, and he took his helmet off and dropped it, and he was yelling down to the fellows on the ground. And he hit the ground, and he didn't realize the wind was blowing pretty hard. And here he successfully gotten out of the airplane and made it to the ground, and he hit the ground hard, and the wind kept his chute inflated and drug him against a rock and killed him.
Uh-oh.
So this I remembered. So I put my helmet back on quickly.
Good for you.
And as it happened, when I hit the ground, I landed on my head.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. It knocked me cold.
So you might have been one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think it's kind of interesting that he, in 66 missions in World War II, never once bailed out. Came very, very close. And as the pilot, he is the one that made the decision, okay, everybody out. And the same thing with the B-47, which this one was. But it was in the Cold War that he finally left the plane. But that was at 21,000 feet. The plane was going 450 miles an hour. And
Maury, has there ever been a carnival ride like that one?
No, not in my estimation.
You've got some more notes there. I'm just so anxious to hear about every one of your favorite Maury stories.
oh, you'd have to have about a 3-hour program. But you know, there's one that I did not put in the book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I decided to do a little role playing with Maury because he was a good soldier, a good officer, and so I said, okay, Maury, I want you to just be yourself, put yourself back in World War II, and you are a prisoner of war. Your plane was shot down. You have been captured by the Germans, and I am Colonel Heinrich, and I am here with the SS, and I want to ask you some questions. And you just, let's go back in time. And so I played the part of this one, and I started off kind of gently, asking him questions, and like a good officer, name, rank, and
serial number.
And by the way, he knew his serial number very well. And so I had a lot of fun with that. And I even told him that, you know, as a German officer, I can have you taken right out back here, nobody would know about it, and have you shot. Now, are you ready to answer some of my questions? Where you came from and what was your mission and stuff? And he just said, Colonel, you know by the Geneva Convention you cannot do that, and I'm not telling you. And I was so proud of him.
Well, they drilled that into us. The reason I remember my serial number, this bracelet my wife gave to me over 60 years ago on my way overseas, before we were married. And she had my name and my serial number engraved in it. And I wore that on every mission I was on.
Because you and your wife have been married how many years now?
60 years ago, the Valentine's Day, last Valentine's Day.
And they had a party.
Yes,
A
we did.
party with 60 guests, or
Yeah,
Yeah,
the kids put it on for him.
how many kids?
around 60 or 70.
Your children, you have two?
Oh, we have 4 children,
4 children?
10 grandchildren, and today our 5th great-grandchild was born. Today.
All right, congratulations,
Happy birthday.
Grandpa.
A girl or a boy?
Oh, it was a boy.
A boy named, do we know yet?
I'm afraid to tell you, but
Okay, well, happy
we haven't talked to the mother. She's in Bend. She's in the hospital, cesarean, and I heard a rumor that they're going to name him after me, and that scares me to death.
Oh,
I don't know.
happy birthday, baby Maury. This is a wonderful, wonderful day.
Another interesting thing about his children is while Maury would have given anything to be a fighter pilot, never could, 2 of his boys became fighter pilots. Tell them about Chris and Eric.
My youngest, or the middle son, was a pilot in the Marine Corps after he graduated from Oregon State, and the elder one graduated from the college down in Ashland, So he went to Oregon State 3 or 4 years and finished up at Ashland. But he went in the Air Force. And,
So we've got all the branches of the military covered here, almost.
pretty much, except the Navy. But, well, I had 2 brothers in the Navy.
Well,
but,
that covers the whole.
Yeah.
And both of those boys they flew jets.
Oh, it must be in the family bloodline. Huh?
Must
Well,
be.
it's interesting because all of my children were raised while I was on active duty in the military. I didn't talk to them about going in or try and convince them to go in. And it just shocked me more than anything when they graduated from college. They just went in the service. They only stayed, both of them only stayed 6 years and
for a tour.
did their tour and got out.
Well,
But-
it sure speaks well for you, and you speak well for the U.S. of A., and
thank
I'm
you.
mighty proud of you.
Thank you very much.
And to you, my hat's off for putting his story in book form. This book will be available for everyone to enjoy. You just pick it up. I'm sure the library has a copy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you contact me at Better Life Television, I can be in touch with you because Maurice's stories meant so much to me. Privilege I've had to meet you on these 3 occasions, brag about him a lot, and I think people around town, all over the area, those of us that planted victory gardens and waved the red, white, and blue, you know, those 1940s were tough for us here too, but nothing like what you did over there.
Well, I had a lot of fun.
You had a lot of fun, and like you told the kid, hey, you don't know nothing about World War II, and the price you guys and women paid to set us free, to keep us free.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
So God bless America.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure doing it. And my manager here, he's the one that pulls the strings. I just follow what he tells me.
Wonderful. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and it's my privilege to meet wonderful people in our neighborhood, like these guys. Thanks for tuning in to Journeys and Journals.